Hello and welcome to the Bleeding Keyboard. Today with me I have the incredible Candice Nola, who made me cry earlier this year when I was reading Bishop. Um, Candice, straight into the questions. Which genre do you write in and how do you define that genre?
I write in the horror field for the most part, and how I define that would be really anything that has an element of fear. Um, when I read the questions over last night, that was my original answer. Like,
Right.
basically anything that has an element of fear. But when I woke up, I kind of started to think about that, and I guess my real answer would be life in general defines horror because just about everything we do has an element of fear. Everything from public speaking, like right now, because I'm not a fan of this, a new relationship, love, heartbreak, a new job, like um, accidents, car crashes, anything happening to our kids. Everything we go through in life has an element of fear. And I think one of the great things about the horror in the horror industry and the writers in it is that even though we tend to depict those more horrifying sides of life and sometimes in the most extreme and graphic way possible, I think at the end of it, we also coax out the beautiful part about it. There's that element that keeps the main person going along. There's that element of survival in there, that strength that they have to find. They love somebody that they want to get home to or they want to survive for. No matter how graphic the story is, there's something beautiful about it. And that is what I feel like we bring out. And if we can bring that out in the midst of the most horrific story imaginable, you can find something beautiful about that. I think that is part of our job. I know that's why that's why I write,
Right.
and that's what I like to find within the stories that I read. I want to find the redeemable part of the story, of the character in the story, the survivor that thought they just can't take any more, but then they do and they survive. And it's a beautiful thing. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, that's what life is. It's surviving it. It's going through all those trials and obstacles and all those things that you thought you couldn't do, no matter how small. But then you get through it and you survive it and you find that sense of strength that you didn't know that you had.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Bishop, I came away from that, although it's a horror novel and the horror in it when it comes is wonderfully done. I came away from it more with a feeling of satisfaction and uplifting and being uplifted by the end of it. And I think your points about horror being there in every aspect of life, they are in every piece of fiction. If you read a romance, the horror that we've got in there is perhaps they're not actually going to get together. And that would be an awful conclusion to a romance story.
Right.
In any,
Or if
yeah,
it fails, that heartbreak, that there's nothing worse than that heartbreak. I mean, that can be all consuming at times. It's
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Because again, when we try and put things into, oh, this is a horror story, people go, oh, it's a lovely little horror story, is it? Yeah, well, not matter. But yeah, life is a horror story.
it
Yeah,
is.
wow, that just got deep, didn't it? Candice, what's your writing schedule?
my writing schedule, 19 hours a day. To break that down, I typically start during the week around 5 a.m. and incorporated into my overall schedule would be all of my social stuff, social media posts, engagement, all of that. That usually happens between like 5 and like 7. I start work because I actually have an actual job. I work at home. So I work from about 7:30 until 5. And then I take a break in the evening for about an hour and a half. And then by 7 in the evening until about 1 a.m., I'm in the office writing. And that also entails working on my own stuff, editing jobs for the editing company that I run, the House of Stitch stuff that I do because I'm the VP for the House of Stitch. So I'm either working on stuff with them, trying to make sure all of the other staff has all of their things in or things that need to be planned or scheduled, just everything that I need to do. I just work until it's time to go to bed or I can't do anymore. And then I get up the next day and start again. Weekends for the most part is all day long from about 9 because I do tend to sleep a little bit more on the weekends because by then I need it. From about 9 again until between like 1 and 2, it's just nothing but website interviews, updates, book reviews, and writing.
Right, I've got two questions that come off this then. First one being, this means that your life's very word focused.
Yes.
Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is that, yeah, how do you feel about that?
It's great. Like, I love every minute of what I do. Every minute.
Again, with the whole thing being word focused, does this mean that if you're actually getting a chance to wind down, you would be playing a game of Scrabble, doing a crossword, or would you think, I don't want anything to do with bloody words, I want to sort of like completely, yeah.
No, I love it. My relaxing time, I'm either reading a book that I have to read for a review for my website. Scrabble games, I do play a lot with my kids. Any word associated game I play a lot. And I also paint. I started doing acrylic pour painting about a year ago.
Oh, brilliant.
So I do a lot of that now when I really need to just kind of take myself out of just the words and the writing and just need to just unwind. So then I'll just get out the paints and I'll just mix a bunch of stuff and I'll just paint for an hour or two. And
yeah, it's really kind of soothing, isn't it? And the other question that I got from that particular point, though, was social media. Is social media important to a contemporary writer?
Yes. Especially in today's environment. Everything is online. People go online faster than they go to the store to find anything they want or need, especially when it comes to the entertainment industry itself. Everybody is online to see who their stars like, who they read, who they watch, what movies are out, what movies their stars like or their friends like. And I feel like if you're not online and you're in the publishing industry, the writing industry, especially the indie industry, you are doing yourself a great disservice. You're not being seen, you're not being exposed to. People don't know who you are, and you're not networking enough because not only do new readers know who you are, but your peers don't know who you are. Unless they personally know you, they have nothing to associate with you other than, oh, they stumbled across your book on an Amazon page. What are the odds of that, of somebody just stumbling across you and you're new? There are millions of books on Amazon. You need to have an established online presence right now, more so than ever. And that includes everything from having a website. You need a home. You need an online home. People can find you. All your links need to be there. Your books need to be there. You need something personal about you, whether you're doing a blog or something, updates on who you are. People like to know who you are. They don't just want to know what you write, but they want to know, can they relate to you as a person too? Like, give them something that they can relate to, whether it's pictures of your pets or pictures of what you like to cook, or if you like to paint, or if you just do like a blog and it's all movie stuff or movie reviews or fashion, if that's what you're into. Give them something personal that they can also relate to. Don't just make it about, here's my books, buy them please. Like, you need, people want a connection. They want to relate to you. You have to be on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. You have to be on all of that, and you have to be engaging. You just can't tweet out a post and say, okay, well, here's my link, buy my book, and then you don't say anything else and you don't engage with anyone else, because then people also get turned off by that too, because they're like, oh, well, they're all just about promoting themselves and they don't really support the community. They don't support anyone else. They're not trying to get to know anyone. That's just sell, sell, sell. You have to find that fine line, I think, between the two.
Fully agree, yeah. And it's just going to be so good for my students to hear that from somebody else, somebody who's doing that successfully, rather than me just sort of like driving it home saying, get a social media presence out there. So which is most important to you when you're writing? Is it plot or character?
Both.
Go on, carry on sitting on that hedge there. Yeah, go on.
Both. You have to have both. Without a plot, you don't have a story. I mean, I have literally no reason to read your book if you don't have an engaging plot. Not only that, if you don't have relatable characters driving that plot, I'm not interested. You need to have a good character driving that plot. You need to have a whole host of them, people that I can relate to, people I can love, and people I can hate, and people that are just vile. And what's going to happen next? Like, you have to have that fine line between the two. Otherwise, you don't have an engaging story at all. You just have a bunch of words on a page that nobody's really interested in.
I'm so pleased you said about love and hate, because ordinarily we think relatable, oh, somebody who's like me. But yeah, it's characters that we can relate to, isn't it? Not just people that we think, oh, I want them to win. That's definitely the goodie. But also, oh, I bloody hate that one. Yeah, I want them to get their comeuppance. I mean, this is what I get when I sit down and watch a slasher movie. The first 10 minutes, I'm thinking, that one can die, that one can die, that one can definitely die in a painful way. Yes.
You need to have those people that you love to hate, just like you have in life. I mean, we all have those people that we know that we're just like, oh, I can't stand that guy. You know, that guy just rubs me the wrong way. And then you have your inner crowd, and you have your friends, and then you have those folks that you know you just don't want anything to do with. The bad guys, the villains of your own life or your own story. You need that in every story you tell, whether it's a screenplay, a movie, a TV show, a book. We all need that range of characters, or otherwise it doesn't sit right with the reader themselves. They don't have that range of people to relate to. You just have, oh, well, here's our character and they're just going to go along and save the day. And, oh, but that guy wasn't that bad. Like, there's nothing to kind of like really get into your heart and your brain and say, oh, that guy's just awful. He deserves to die. Or, oh, I hope they save her. She's so sweet. And she's so, you need to give them somebody to hate and something to root for.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, the reason why I ask about plot or character is people so often fall onto both sides of it. But I read for plot, yet my PhD, sorry, I read for character, I should have said, but my PhD was all about plot and the relationship between plot and genre. So yeah, I think you're right that they're both equally important. And yeah, I would have sat on that fence if I'd have been asked that question. What piece of writing advice would you give to anybody who's just starting out?
Oh man. One piece, or what all would I say?
Go on, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Learn the craft, learn the industry, learn the jargon, learn the lingo, learn what you're writing, learn why you are writing it. And I say that because a lot of people can string words together into a sentence and string sentences together into a page and then a book. Does it make sense? Is it engaging? Do I want to read it? Does it drive the story along? Learn the craft. And it is a craft. Telling a story is a craft. No matter what story you're trying to tell, book, movie, anything, it's a craft. There's a lot that goes into it. You have to have something within those layers behind the words. It can't just be, and then Jack drove to the White House and then he got out and opened the door and okay, you need to have what's the meaning behind that house? What is that house? It's a craft. You have to learn it. You need to learn the industry itself. What are the trends? What are people writing? What are they responding to? Do you know what an arc is? When somebody says, hey, send me an arc, do you know what that means? Do you know the difference between a collection or an anthology? You'd be surprised how many people I've met in the last 2 years that don't. And I'm just astounded because I'm like, oh, but you're writing and you've been in both, but you don't know the difference between two. Learn the industry itself and learn how to market yourself. You can't be a writer and just expect the rest to fall into place. You need to learn the business aspects of it every bit as much as you're going to learn the crafting side of telling a proper story. It's a lot of learning, it's a lot of trial and error. But if at the end of the day, when you go to sleep and you know in your heart that you're a writer, and when you wake up and the only thing you think about is writing, then you're a writer. That's what you need to do. That's where you belong. But in order to do that, you need to learn it and make sure that you're checking all the boxes in order to make you a writer, and not just one of them, but the best one you can be. Learn.
Wow. I'd never even thought of putting it in that way, but that makes just so much sense. Yeah. When you say that, learn what you're writing and why you're writing, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
What you are writing falls into what genre you want to write.
Right.
Whether it's horror, whether it's thriller, crime, romance. But then each one of those has their own subgenres that fall into that as well. So are you going to focus on the wider industry as a whole and just write horror and everything within it? Or do you want to write extreme? Do you want to write splatterpunk? Do you want to write romance or, the new spicy romance? Do you want to write erotica? What part of the industry do you want to write? And then you need to look kind of inside yourself and say, okay, why am I writing this? If it doesn't mean something personal to you, it's going to fall flat. Whatever story you tell is going to fall flat. Everything we write has an element of ourselves in it. We all write from real life experiences, whether we say it bluntly within the story or not. We are all taking from part of ourselves with every story we write. Our emotions, our background, where we were raised, the environment, the landscape, bits and pieces of our actual house, things that we remember when we were kids. It's why are you writing? What is your purpose in this? And what do you want to leave behind when that story is ended?
Fantastic. And yeah, that does clear it up for me, actually. So who do you read for pleasure?
Who do I read for pleasure? Right now, everybody. Everybody in the industry. Stephen King has always been my number one. I've been reading him since I was about 11. I have everything he has ever owned. And recently, in the last 10, 15 years, Jeff Strand has been one of my number one influences. Jonathan Janz, Ronald Malfi. Recently, Dave Jeffries is a huge influence of mine. He's brilliant. Within the horror industry itself, right now, I'm currently reading Daniel Volpe, Christopher Ruffty, Christopher Triana, Aaron Beauregard, Carver Pike. Cosmic horror, there's an author who's absolutely brilliant by the name of William Holloway.
Yes.
He's brilliant with the cosmic horror. I buy everything that he writes. I could go on for an hour, but there are so many people in the horror industry right now that are on the rise. People really need to start paying attention to who is out there and the books that they are putting out. It's amazing right now.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, the names that you were listing there, that's like a who's who of stuff like who's top in horror at the moment. And yeah. Right. So my next question was going to be, in your novel Bishop, in your excellent novel Bishop, you present a story that shows a forensic level of understanding for cryptids. How much research was involved to get this level of accuracy?
A lot. Cryptids for me has been a long time love. Creatures of all kinds have always been my favorite stories to watch, I think, or to read and watch, of course. There's always that element of what's really out there in the woods, out there in the world. There's so much of it that we've not explored or have seen. And I think it falls along the lines of being more plausible than a lot of people really think. I mean, have you seen some of the things they're still finding in the ocean? Tell me there's not monsters out there.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, my wife suggested we should go camping, and I gave her your book and said, "Read this. Yeah, this is why we're not going camping." Yeah.
Yeah. So I've always been a fan of Native American lore and cultures. I am actually part Native American myself, so I've read a lot of lore about the different stories of Wendigos, shapeshifters, werewolves, of course. Who doesn't know all the mythology behind the werewolves? But I wanted to take something that already hadn't been written over and over and over. I love a werewolf story, but I wanted to play on the shape-shifting aspect in a lot of Native American tribal lore.
Right.
So essentially, I took that and played upon the fact that when he changed, it happened when he was so young that he kind of lost the knowledge of how to shift. He was a child the first time he changed. He did not know his history. He did not know like the different things you could do with it. He hadn't even had a chance to be raised within it. He shifted to a bear, and that is what his bloodline traditionally began to shift to. That's what he naturally shifted to, because at that age, those are the only stories that he knew of. Like, they shifted to bears. He remained that way for so long, living in the woods by himself, that I just went with, he's a werebear. He's not a shapeshifter, essentially, because at the point he is now, he cannot change in anything else. That is his natural form. It's a bear. So I took that, and I also wanted to play with the transformation itself. There is no, you just, go through this 1 minute change of, you burst out and you're this, you're this thing. Like, it's painful. There's nothing about that transformation that says, oh, this is going to be simple or instantaneous or quick. There's pain involved, and there's a lot of blood, and there's a lot of things that have to take place, because within your own skin, your bones are changing and shifting and growing and expanding and reforming, and you have new skin that's growing in the fur, like I wanted to really make that transformation a bit more real and a bit more plausible. I wanted you to feel his pain. Like I wanted people to understand that when he's changing, it's not a magical thing. It's not just freeing and painless. Oh no, it's sudden and done. No, like he's writhing on the ground in pain, and it's intense. But the payout for him is worth it because his nature on the inside is that of his pair. He's a beast. He's one with that. So he sacrifices himself every time he changes in order to let that part of him out to do the things that he needs to do. He needs to be that. Yeah, there's a transformation involved and it's painful, but the payout he gets from that is also what keeps him alive. So I played with that. And then the Wendigo lore itself is damn near perfect, in my opinion. You don't want to play with that too much. There's nothing creepier than a Wendigo. Could you imagine this thing stalking you in the woods?
No, I can't. You've already made me imagine that whilst I was reading the bloody book. I don't want to imagine it again. Yeah, that was terrifying.
So I took pieces of different lore and I kind of combined them into my own version of it. But I didn't stray too far from the traditional sense of what a Wendigo is, what they look like, their overall appearance, what they can do. A Wendigo, if you know anything about the lore itself, a Wendigo is literally a person that succumbed to cannibalism at some point, whether it was for survival or some other reason, and they are infected by this Wendigo, another Wendigo that comes out. It can sense that that person has subjected themselves to cannibalism. So another Wendigo is able to sense that, tracks them, bites them, basically turns them into a Wendigo itself. Because once a Wendigo attacks you, they're either going to eat you or they're going to infect you. And once you have been infected by a Wendigo itself, you're never fulfilled. You can never eat enough. You grow because of the amount of food, people you eat. You continue to grow, so your mass changes. You get taller. You become this massive thing with super long arms and legs. Your bone structure expands from all the intake of the food you eat, but you also become completely emaciated. You're nothing but a skeleton of skin and bone and just grotesqueness because you grow into this demonic looking thing of just hunger and rage. They eat and they eat and they eat and they eat and they eat, and there's nothing that will ever stop that. They also are almost impossible to kill. And then they grow the antlers on their heads because of different things that they eat, and their bone structure changes with everything that they eat. So the antlers are actually their bones growing out through their skull because they just continue to change to accommodate the nutrients and the proteins and things that they take in, but their system does nothing else with it. A Wendigo is it's just horrifying. It's horrifying. And not only that, they retain some of their human elements. I don't want to say humanity because it's not quite it, but some of them are able to retain some of the knowledge they had as a human for a long time, which is why mine was able to speak. Not much. You'll see there were no paragraphs, but certain words they still can say. They have the knowledge and they can understand certain things and they can say what they need to say, but they very rarely speak unless they're toying with you or like stalking you. As you can see, there were certain times in the book where he spoke, like when he was stalking the woman in the cave. Like there was just that one word, but it was enough, And if that didn't send chills down your spine, I don't know what.
My God, when I asked you how much research you put, and you said a lot, you put one hell of a lot of research into this, didn't you?
A lot, yeah. I read a lot of books. Like I went through website after website after website. I looked at all the different types of lore. There's a whole notebook of like outlines in different pieces that I wanted to take on each end and kind of make each character my own, but still hold true to what the lore was and represent each bit of the culture appropriately as well. So
and yeah, all credit to you. Yeah, you absolutely did. So in The Breach and Beyond the Breach, you followed the adventures of is it Lariah Jameson? Have I pronounced that correctly?
Larea.
Lariah, sorry. You followed the adventures of Lariah. What challenges have you found in writing a series character?
For Larea, the challenge was not so much her. I knew her very well by the time I finished the first one. And I also knew that her story was not done. So it was pretty much a natural extension just to write the next part. And she was already complete as a character. She was very well fleshed out and well rounded. Her backstory was there, although there was more of it to be told. My challenge with writing the second part of that was rounding out the supporting characters in the story. Because in the first one, she's essentially alone for 90% of the book.
Right.
There are some of her friends in the first part, and there are some of those relationships that are explored as she's going along, but she's living in this alternate world by herself. There's nothing but creatures and some other things that come up along the way. Not sure if you read it or not, so I don't want to spoil it.
I haven't read it yet, no.
But she's essentially alone in this new place. So the supporting characters that I gave her in the first book, they're there, but they're not fully developed. They're just sort of part of the backstory. The second part, though, they all come into play a lot more, and I needed to really round them out more, kind of decide what roles they were going to play in part two, how much of a role they would have, and then I needed to bring in some other outside elements too, because at that point they needed to engage some assistance from a counselor that she had as a child, and then I brought in a Native American medicine man,
right,
who teaches them how to dream walk. So that becomes a part of the story as well, because there's a piece of the story where she is attempting to bring one of her friends into this breach with her. And because it was created essentially from her dreams, they're not sure if he's going to be able to just cross over or if he needs to be in the dream world first with her, giving him the capability to cross with her. So they were experimenting with the elements of dream walking. And that took a lot of research too, because I had to really go into how all of that works, how it's taught, and how we can kind of play with bringing that other character into her dream world. And of course, I played it up as we may need this, we may not. Just because, I mean, you don't know if that's going to work or not. And I didn't want to reveal it too soon that he was actually going to be able to go with her. I didn't want that to be a sure thing. Oh, yeah, her boyfriend is going to go with her now and she's going to have help and it's going to be great. I still wanted that element of, but what if she has to go back alone? What if, they try this and he still can't go, and here she is alone again being hunted by all these nightmares in this other world. So Breach is basically, it is a world created from the nightmares she had as a kid. And there are all these horrific monsters and creatures in there, and every one of them is hunting her. Like, they're trapped in this world she put them in. They can't have access to her anymore. She basically trapped them. So from the moment she gets in this other world, she's being hunted. It is a true-on survival story. It is just, she has no idea where she is. There's no weapons. There's no food. There's no sense of where am I can hide here, I can go here. She has no idea where she is or why, and she's just being hunted on all sides. So
So
yeah,
yeah,
it's
from what you said
fascinating.
then so far, I mean, Native American culture is very, very important to your writing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which actually ties into the next question I've got, the penultimate one. So, as a female horror writer, do you find it's more difficult for women to succeed in the genre than it is for men?
That's a loaded question.
All
You know,
my questions are loaded. Yeah.
I thought about this one a lot last night, and I have been part of the ongoing discussions about women in horror right now. And I've been on several interviews and podcasts about it as well. And my answer is yes, there are challenges that women still face. I think today, however, a lot of those challenges are not as severe as they once were, although they do still exist. There are more women writing in horror right now than there have ever been. And they're also becoming more widely accepted, and not just there's a more diverse group of women of all backgrounds and cultures and ethnic, and you have trans women, and you have, the lesbians and the LGBTQ, the whole rainbow of women and people who identify as women. Every range of gender is being represented in the culture now, which is amazing because there are so many different perspectives being put into play now from a horror standpoint and from the stories element itself that people would have never thought of. There are so many different things that people go through that were never represented before, when horror was just all written by just all white male, or whatever it was. Like, there's only so many perspectives you can have, but now there's every perspective you could ever want. There's every background, there's every race, there's every culture that is now writing horror and speculative fiction and paranormal, and you get a great story, but you're also immersed in this different perspective that you never had. It's coming from the viewpoint of a woman, or a homosexual, or a trans, or a lesbian, or a black woman, or an Indian woman, or whatever background it is. You get a lot of that sense of what they went through, what their perspective on the world is, what their perspective on that particular story is. And things are just different. And I think it adds a level of richness
Yeah.
to the industry itself that has never been there. As far as my own challenges, I haven't really seen a lot of it as of yet. I think for women in general and any other diverse group as a whole, not just women, our biggest challenge is the readers. It's not so much the industry. There's still some. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the industry is all wholly accepting of everything right now, but it's the readers who I find are more dismissive when it's a male reader per se. And for instance, in a lot of the Facebook groups I'm on, you will get people out there, readers, who are looking for recommendations. Hey, anybody got any good book recommendations? I need a good horror story. I need a good brutal graphic horror story. And people start recommending stories written by women, or a diverse culture, or a lesbian, or a trans woman, and it's a phenomenal book, but the reader, the male, will dismiss it. Oh, I don't read books by women. I don't read books by people of color. Yeah, they just can't make it, they're dismissive, because I think a lot of men who read horror are used to the good old standby. They're not willing to venture their mindset into something maybe they're not familiar with. And I feel like they also think that maybe women authors cannot cut as deep, cannot be as brutal as a man. And I beg to disagree, because there are some female authors right now that are writing some of the most horrific and graphic and brutal scenes that I have ever seen in my life. And that's far surpasses most of the male written books that I've written. Women like Franklin, Rain Havoc, Regina Watts, Judith Sonnet is another one. She's doing phenomenal things, and her stories are the most brutal things I've ever read. They've made me cringe. I feel like the readers are more of a obstacle than anything right now, because they just won't open their mindset up to the fact that women can offer a more brutal and a more realistic approach to the horror that's on the page, because the fact is women have experienced the brunt of it.
I think you're absolutely right. I was smiling before when you were saying it, and I wasn't smiling because I think, oh, this is hilarious that there is such a situation. I was smiling my own, as a white cisgendered male. I've got very little experience of anything outside being a white cisgendered male, but because my name is Ashley, and I've not had my picture on the back of some books. I had one title go out several years ago, and went out under my name, and one of the reviewers on Amazon said, you can tell this book was written by a woman because she takes 100 pages to get to the point of the story. And I thought, yeah, that's somebody who's got in there with their own mindset of, do you know what? It's written by a woman. I'm just going to sort of like bitch and moan about it. And yeah, I think you're right. I think there are some readers that go in there with these blinkered goggles on with, oh, this is written by this sort of person, therefore I'm not going to enjoy it. Yeah. And yeah, it is something that we you're saying in a good way, because you are a progressive, and I think we've had this discussion on Twitter. You are a positive person, whereas me, I'm a grumpy old bastard. But yeah, your attitude of the reader needs to change is a good progressive one. My attitude is, do you know what? If the reader's missing out on that, in that case, it serves them right for being a moron that doesn't see past their own blinkered attitudes.
I mean, it's not so much, well, yeah, it is. I would never tell someone I think they need to change or try to force somebody to change. You are who you are. But you basically hit it on the head. Like, you're missing out. There are so many phenomenal stories being written from so many different points of view, and there are things being put on the page now that were not being put on the page 20, 30 years ago, that weren't even dreamt of. You're missing out if you're only sticking to the 5 mainstream horror authors that are being shoved down your throat at the closest bookstore. Like, there are so many of us just doing phenomenal things, and that includes male, women, no matter what gender you are, no matter how you identify. There are hundreds of phenomenal authors I could name right now, and I have friends from the entire realm of the industry, every gender, every culture, every background and race, and I assure you, you're missing out. I've read thousands of books in my life. I've been an avid reader since I learned to read. I have literally read thousands. In the last 4 years, I have read some of the best stories I have ever read in my adult life.
Yeah, just to move it away from books for a moment and to go back to the point of people are missing out. One of the things that I watch for entertainment on TV is RuPaul's Drag Race. And yeah, I will tell anybody, if you want to watch the whole gamut of emotions, from bitchiness to humor to sorrow and sadness, you can get all of that in 1 hour-long episode. Yep. And people go, yeah, but it's full of people who are dressing up as. It doesn't matter. It's just so engaging.
It's beautiful, and it is a snapshot into who they are. It's not just about being dressed up in drag. You're seeing them at their most raw. They're
Yeah,
vulnerable in that moment, and those little snapshots that you see, that all of those emotions come into play, and you know those emotions are real. You're getting to witness some of what they've had to experience in life as children, as growing up, as coming into their own identity.
yeah,
These are traumatized people. These are people stronger than many people have had to be just because of who they are. You're missing out on everything because not only do you get to witness how strong some of these people are capable, but you're getting to witness them shine
yeah,
too. You're missing one of the greatest moments in human tr- triumph, because that moment for them is it. Everything has led to that moment. Everything has brought them all the pain, all the trauma, all the suffering that they have went through, and they're up there and they're shining and they're glowing and they're laughing, and they have a sense of humor about things, and they can look back on things and say, yeah, it hurt, but it brought me here, and without it I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be in this element right now. I wouldn't be who I am, and there's nothing more genuine than that.
100% agree with you. Um, Final question, Candice. Yeah, what are you currently working on, and where can we find more of your work?
What am I currently working on? Everything. Um, I have probably 5 projects in the works right now. Um, I'm finishing up an anthology story this week for something coming out in March called Just a Girl. It is a female written horror anthology. That should be fun, and my story, I think, will be well received for that one. I have a novella that I'm writing that is coming out in October. I am working on the next installment for Hank Flynn, which will be coming out, I believe, sometime in the spring. I am working on another story for, well, a novel for Thunderstorm. So I'm very excited about that. And you can find me on my website, uncomfortablydark.com. It is my website. You can find all of the information about me, my blog, my uh, books, and everything are there. But my website is also more widely known and used for a supporter for the indie horror community itself. So every week you can find author interviews, new book reviews. I do new release um, interviews as well. So if there's an author that has something new out, I will do a feature on them where it's a short interview with them about their new re- release, plus a full review of their new book, and then all the links and everything. I'm currently running an interview series right now called Horror Legends and Icons. That will be wrapping up in about 3 weeks, I think. It started back in May, and I've had everybody from Ed Lee on there, Brian Keene, Haley Piper was on, um, Ian Rob Wright from the UK was on. There are several more people that are going to be on soon. So that is out there. So yeah, you can find a whole host of just indie horror related news and interviews and all of that out there.
And I will be putting links down below here on YouTube and also on my website as well. Candice, thank you so much for your time.
You're
That
welcome.
was really, really enjoyable.
Thank you for having me.